Welcome back to another episode of Cancer Out Loud, the CancerCare podcast. My name is Cassie Spector, and I'm the Breast and Gynecological Cancers Program Coordinator, as well as an oncology social worker at CancerCare. Since 2009, the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation and CancerCare have partnered together to ensure those diagnosed with TNBC have access to free psychosocial services and support. This March, the TNBC Foundation and CancerCare have partnered to highlight Triple Negative Breast Cancer Day. This day is a global event that helps bring awareness and funds to triple negative breast cancer. Throughout the month of March, 100% of all donations that the TNBC Foundation receives from individual donors towards this initiative are dedicated exclusively to TNBC-specific research. Throughout this episode, we will talk about what is triple negative breast cancer or TNBC, discuss the services offered by the TNBC Foundation and CancerCare, and hear from one of our TNBC ambassadors, Allison, and her experience coping with TNBC. Let's start with a little background on what exactly is triple negative breast cancer or TNBC. TNBC is a type of breast cancer that does not have three of the most common receptors found in breast cancer: estrogen, progesterone, and the HER2 protein. This makes TNBC more aggressive and harder to treat than other types of breast cancer because it doesn't respond to hormone therapy or drugs that target hormone receptors. TNBC accounts for 10 to 15% of all breast cancers. While it can affect anyone, it's more common in younger women, those under 40, African American women, and those with a BRCA1 gene mutation. It's also more likely to reoccur after treatment compared to other types of breast cancer. While this information may seem daunting, there is some encouraging news, especially in the realm of treatment. The treatment landscape for TNBC has changed significantly in recent years, offering new options for patients. CancerCare and the TNBC Foundation partner to offer Connect education workshops, led by oncology experts to provide information on advancements in TNBC treatments. You can listen to these programs by visiting the CancerCare website. While there have been significant treatment advances in the last few years, we are hoping for continued research and trials that will allow for more effective and less aggressive treatments for TNBC. Now let's turn to the psychosocial side of TNBC. While any cancer diagnosis can feel emotionally overwhelming, the nature of TNBC can heighten the emotional toll on patients and their loved ones. Many patients with TNBC face anxiety, fear, sadness, especially given the uncertainty of a TNBC diagnosis. Throughout this episode, we will learn more about tools for coping, resources for support, and managing the emotional and practical challenges of a TNBC diagnosis. If you're interested in learning more about the services that the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation and CancerCare offer, I encourage you to call the TNBC helpline at 877-880-8622, or you can visit CancerCare's website, cancercare.org, or the TNBC Foundation's website, tnbcfoundation.org. Welcome back to another episode of Cancer Out Loud, the CancerCare podcast. I'll be your host today, and we're joined today by Allison. And I wanted to welcome Allison to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
And so Allison is a TNBC ambassador, so we're so excited that she's able to join us and share a little bit more about her story and be able to share more about triple negative breast cancer. So thanks again.
Thank you.
So we'll start off with the first question of, really, can you just share a little bit about your life before the diagnosis, what was really going on at that time, and how it's really changed since the diagnosis?
Sure. So initially I was diagnosed at 36. So at that time I am a partner in a law firm down in Florida. I do civil litigation, so very busy and in the courtroom. And I have two kids who are now 10 and 8. At the time, they were 6 and 8. So, very young, kind of in that life of working mom and running around and activities and sports. We also have some rescue dogs and a Bengal cat and just all sorts of chaos in the house. So, very busy and very active and, very much in kind of, navigating career and kids. So it it was definitely that time of life a little bit different, difficult to then, of course, get this diagnosis and have to, navigate what this was going to be like and how it would impact all of our lives, especially that its mom got sick.
Right, right. And I'm sure so much changed, right, over that time period of being diagnosed. And when you're balancing kids, a career, all of that, right, it's difficult to then have to put your life on hold or be able to take that pause and now get this diagnosis. So let's talk a little bit more about what it was like when you were diagnosed, how you first found out that it was triple negative breast cancer. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I admittedly wasn't doing regular breast exams. It just wasn't something I really thought about. I don't have any family history that I know of breast cancer. And I did my annual appointments with my doctor. They did a check and I assumed everything was fine. But I was actually doing a workout in the gym, was doing like a chest press and felt kind of a sharp pain in my chest at that time. And I thought it was almost like a muscle had torn. So I reached back to feel and I felt just this marble size lump that I had never noticed before. So kind of shocking and didn't really think much of it. I showed it to my stepmother's an ultrasound technician, so just asked her and she's just go get a doctor to look at it, but you're probably fine. I went into my doctor and again, he felt it and he was like, you're probably fine. You're young, but let's go ahead and schedule a mammogram, which thank goodness he did because I've heard other stories that doesn't always happen. But, went in and very quickly it turned out that, yes, that spot was a concern, but then I also had 3 other spots that looked suspicious. So immediately kind of whirlwind went into biopsies and within 2 days they came back. And I actually it was my daughter's 6th birthday and I was sitting in the doctor's office with her doing her 6-year-old checkup. And I'm in the waiting room, she's sitting there playing with toys and I see that the center is calling me. And I'm like, well, how can I not answer it? Obviously, like I can't wait. And they just, tell me, yeah, all 4 are cancer over the phone, just like that, and I even have a notepad in my purse and I'm frantically writing down what they're saying, invasive ductal carcinoma, no lymph nodes, all 4. And I still have the note because it was just so frantic. And I'm trying to, still put on mom face. So I hang up the phone, just getting this alarming news and had to just go in and do her doctor's appointment like nothing was wrong. So obviously it was a big shift from there. My doctor had called me and was so upset for me and said, I'm sending you to the doctors that treated my mother. So, you're in great hands. I was so lucky that I did that first doctor that sat down with me. That was who explained what the triple negative meant. And I remember her going through the lab notes and saying, okay, it's negative for estrogen, it's negative for progesterone, and it's negative for HER2. And I immediately was like, oh, that's good, thinking negative.
Right.
In the medical world is usually a good thing. But she was like, no, that's not great. So I didn't really know anything about it before. I had never heard. I didn't know there was different types of breast cancer. I thought I was going to be getting surgery and, going from there. But, the nature of triple negative, they now do chemo beforehand. So, I was told I'm going to be going through 6 months of rigorous chemo. She called it the big guns, I think is what she called it. And then coming back for surgery. So immediately trying to wrap my head around that and what that meant, just, from our logistics in life, it was a big change and it was a big mental shift. I think telling the kids was the hardest part too, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I just ruined my daughter's birthday if I got diagnosed on her birthday. But now it's kind of become like a celebration thing every year, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that and sharing kind of what it looked like when you were first diagnosed. And I'm sure getting that call, like in a doctor's office for your daughter, like that was really difficult to then put on that brave face and say, like, okay, now I have to go to her appointment and act like that call never happened.
Exactly. Go back to being a mom and just smile and say everything's fine, as you're having a mental breakdown. And, I think that's a lot in our, the triple negative community. A lot of us are young, young kids and moms. And I think that's always, one of the hardest parts we all say is just you have to keep being a mom and, not scare your child, even though you're mentally having a breakdown and just keep going. So it's interesting.
And I know I talk to a lot of young adults diagnosed with cancer, and while navigating parenthood and with young kids, like it's often difficult to have those conversations with your kids of like, this is what's going on. So I'm wondering how that was like for you and if you have any advice for young moms who may be diagnosed and not sure how to tell their kids.
That was, I think, the toughest part about it. I think no matter what, that will always be the hardest day. And we kind of kept the news quiet. Like her actual birthday was on a Tuesday and she had a birthday party on Saturday. And we just thought, okay, we're not talking to this about her at all. So we didn't tell the kids until the day after on that Sunday. And we got some great advice from some social workers at the Cancer Institute that we went to that said, it's really important to use the word cancer, not just say sickness, because you don't want kids to think, oh, I'm sick. Now this is going to happen. Well, we tried our best to kind of explain that, my cells are not working right and we got to fix this. And then explain there's going to be this big medicine that I had to go through and kind of try to explain how it was going to impact them directly. And, the biggest thing for my daughter was, we told her, I know cold capping exists now. My doctor didn't want me to do cold capping because of how many tumors I had. She's like, let's just, cook you as much as we can. So I knew I was going to lose all my hair. And at the time, I've got this red hair and it was really, really long after the pandemic. And my daughter called it the Little Mermaid hair. So she loved it. And so hearing, mom's going to be completely bald, she's going to lose her hair. And she really struggled with that. That was a hard thought process for her. And I ended up finding a really cool place that I could cut off all my hair before I started. So I actually decided to keep my hair and they could turn it into a wig. So it was really neat. So I went ahead and did like a really cool haircut. Like I did it like the singer Pink, like kind of a faux hawk. And just kind of, made it fun for a little bit and kept that hair. But so that was a big impact. And then just trying to explain to them, I'm going to be sick for a bit and there's going to be days where I'm going to have to stay in bed. I'm not going to feel good. And we ended up having my sister move in with us to help out. Luckily, we had her available so she could kind of come and play the mom role for a bit. And I think the hardest part too going through it was just like when they got sick, I had to go barricade in another room and wear a mask and couldn't hug them and couldn't give the mom cuddles that you normally give when they're sick. So that was hard to be a part of it. Thankfully, my sister was there to do that. And then even when I was done with treatment for a while, they would get sick and be like, no, I can't touch you. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I want the hug.
Like, we're good now. We're good. White cells are back up. But that definitely was the hardest day, just trying to explain it to them. And they really didn't understand. They were so little. I mean, 6 and 8, they didn't know. And just how much I would miss out on that year, just all the kids' birthday parties and activities. I managed to go out to a lot of their sporting events just because like baseball's outside and all of that. But that's I think the hardest part about all of it, just being this age.
Absolutely. And having to miss out on those things and putting your life on hold for a year for those moments where even the small things that you want to do with your kids, like hug them when they're sick, right? That's something you don't necessarily think about if you're not going through a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly. Something we take for granted, I guess. Normally it's like another kid's sick, but not being able to be the mom was hard.
And I know we jumped ahead a little bit, so I just wanted to go back to telling us a little bit more. I know you touched on it a little bit of the treatments that you went through and what that was like for you emotionally and physically, because it sounds like you did go through really difficult treatment.
Yeah, so the triple negative treatment plan is the most aggressive, I think, for most of the breast cancers. No matter what stage you are, you could be stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, it's going to be the same. And you go through, the hardest part was the first 12 weeks of chemo, that you get your port put in and then you're pretty much launched into chemo. I mean, everything goes very quickly. And I had to go every week for 12 weeks for chemotherapy. And I live in Boca Raton, Florida, but I was treating down in Miami. So without traffic, that's an hour drive. But if anybody knows, living in Miami, there's always traffic. So it's always about an hour and a half each way. So just the act of getting down there each week was tricky. And that chemo was really hard on me. That was the one where I got really, really sick. Just, the first part wasn't too bad, but as it gets progressively harder. And combining that because they now have immunotherapy for the triple negative breast cancer, which is a huge breakthrough and it's great news, but it just adds a level of chemicals in your body and kind of toxicity. And it's made it challenging to get through. And then also you got a shot to like shut down your ovaries, kind of put you into menopause. So now you're suddenly getting hot flashes and bone pain and, brain fog. It was a really hard one from all of that. And just like, I decided to keep working through it. My doctor really encouraged me to keep working because it kind of the object in motion stays in motion thought process. So it gave me something to do, but, I'm very lucky. I'm a partner at a great law firm where if I didn't feel good enough that day to like get up and work, then they would cover for me. And I kind of took a reduced caseload. But, I think that, you definitely have nausea. You definitely have just kind of like aversions to food. I really didn't like certain things to eat. Everything tasted really salty to me, which is apparently a side effect. So it was hard to find things to eat. And then the second course, part of the chemo was then another 12-week round. And that's kind of the more hardcore chemo, but you go every 3 weeks. So I was so scared of that one, but it ended up being kind of the easier one because it wasn't every week. It was not just like this relentless ongoing thing. It was every 3 weeks. So I got like a good week or two in between where I felt pretty good and pretty normal. Just, had to be aware of white blood cell count and germs, but I was able to be up a little more, be a little more active, be out and about. So that was the chemo process and continued immunotherapy. And then at that point, then we went through the double mastectomy with lymph nodes removed. And at that point, I was really lucky. I never had any lymph node involvement, and I got what's called a complete pathological response. So there was no tumors left, despite all these tumors. I mean, I thought, 4 of them, there'd be something. Nothing left. So from then, I didn't have to do radiation, which a lot of people do, and I didn't have to do any more chemo after that. The only thing I kept doing was immunotherapy, and that went for another year. Which that wasn't really that bad. It was every 3 weeks. I didn't have any side effects from it. I know a lot of people do, but I actually was okay. And that was kind of more where we started getting back to regular life. I still had to go every 3 weeks. I still had a port in my chest, but I could be out and about. Hair started growing back, a little less sick feeling. And then part of that was just the reconstruction then after the mastectomy. So then I eventually did opt for like implant reconstruction, which wasn't until a little bit later they allowed, your skin to heal and all of that. So that was the last step in the process, reconstruction.
Thank you. And it sounds like it was difficult managing those expectations at work, right? As accommodating as they were, it sounds like they were very accommodating, which is great. It can always be difficult to manage those expectations of also yourself, of what you want to do, even if there's less pressure on the work side of it. So I'm wondering too, like, how you were juggling your career, your family, everything else while also going through the treatments.
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. And I kind of joke that I was lucky that this happened to me post-pandemic because being a lawyer previously meant running all over the place. You would go South Florida, we'd practice down in Miami, up in West Palm, and you're going in person to court and to depositions. After the pandemic, everything really flipped to Zoom. So, I didn't have to get dressed and go out and go, schlep around and be around a bunch of people. So I was able to just get up out of bed, go to my desk and work when I felt like working, threw on a wig, threw on a suit jacket. Nobody knew that I was even sick for a long time. So that made it more feasible. I could adjust my schedule if I wasn't feeling good one day. We could either cancel depositions or have someone else cover it. So I was able to navigate it pretty well. I definitely would notice if brain fog would kick in. I was very aware I didn't want to commit like malpractice or something. Right. So we always had people looking over everything I did. I wanted to make sure everything looked well. And I definitely took a reduced caseload than what I normally do. So that became pretty manageable. I definitely don't think I was superstar lawyer for like that year, but I don't think anyone expected me to be, thankfully. So that wasn't too bad. But then, just juggling the kids' schedules and all of the things going on and just running the household was really hard. So my husband really had to, do a lot of the housework. He really stepped up and kind of did all of the things that needed to be done. And then having my sister there was a huge help. I mean, she took the kids to a lot of their activities, a lot of their, stuff that they had going on. So thankfully with that added support. And then my brother also lived close and he would take me to a lot of the treatments because that was the other big part. And his wife as well, my sister-in-law, we had to drive all this way. So then, sometimes we're stuck in traffic trying to come back, but kids need to be picked up from school. So, and this needs to be dealt with. My husband's also a lawyer who's working full time. So thankfully, we had a really nice support system around us and everybody kind of helped us navigate and, get to and from all of these different activities.
That's great that you had that support system. They were able to like show up for you when you needed it and provide the support that you were looking for too. It sounds like being there for you and being able to pick up your kids when you needed that, and your sister was able to be there. So that's really great that you had that support system. But it could be hard to navigate like the support you may need in that time and asking for help. I know a lot of people do mention how difficult that can be, asking for help from their family members or from friends or loved ones. And I'm wondering too, from like a patient's perspective, if you have advice for family members or loved ones of patients with TNBC, like what advice would you give someone who wants to support another patient?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because, especially being this young, we always had a joke with my friends that like I was the first to get married, I was the first to have kids, but now I'm the first to get cancer. And so people don't know what to do because they haven't experienced it. And I did notice that a lot. And I think that, just any gesture is really nice. It didn't have to be like a big gift or something, but just like my favorite thing was people were just texting and checking in and just saying, hey, they knew my chemo dates were Thursday and I just get a message Thursday morning, like, you got this, hang in there. I think that means a lot more to people than people realize. They don't know what to say, but it's like, you really don't have to say anything, just, thinking about you. And as far as physical, actual support that people can do, I had a friend set up a meal train, which that was so great. I mean, that was so nice. We had people actually come and bring dinners to us or, just send like an Uber Eats gift card or have a meal delivered. And that takes a huge burden off of everybody in the house, having to worry about dinner that night. I also think the best thing I could say is just don't ask, just like do, because especially for, us young moms, like we don't really like to ask for help, right? You kind of want to just get everything done. So it's hard to say, what do you need? It's not a very great question. It's like, I don't know, I'm fine, I can handle it. But just instead, hey, I'm going to come over and pick up the kids on Saturday and I'm going to take them out, for a couple hours, give you a little peace and quiet, and don't even ask, just like do. And my firm sent like a gift card to have like a cleaning company come in and clean, which was fantastic. And they just did that, without asking. So I think anything you can do like that just to help, allow the person to kind of heal and have some quiet space is really helpful. I had a lot of great, cute gifts as far like blankets and kind of cozy gifts. I think I have more blankets than I'll ever need in my life. So I was like, these are fantastic. It was like everybody sent a blanket. So I would also say, think about what that person typically likes. Are they a tea drinker? Do they like, socks or, just kind of a variety of different things and kind of think about that particular person. But I mean, anything like that is just so appreciated and just really was so touching when people did that.
It sounds like really checking in and being able to show up in a way of like just doing things, being like, hey, I'm going to take your kids like for a couple hours, and just people doing that. It sounds like even if it's just a couple hours, someone might not realize how meaningful that really is for someone.
It's not even just for the patient too, but just like the kids to kind of get out of the house and not be wrapped up in all the cancer, but yeah, to just have a little peace and quiet and not feel bad about it. Like to know the kids are out having fun and not sitting there bored is a nice relief for the mom.
Absolutely. And as a young adult, it can be so difficult of like, young adulthood is hard enough, right? You're without a cancer diagnosis, right? You're navigating your career, you're navigating kids, you're navigating like where you want to take your life. And then you throw in a cancer diagnosis and it can really be difficult to navigate that. So I'm glad that you had the support system to show up for you and to be there for you. And I hope that advice helps another family member or loved one, so then they're able to show up for their family member or whoever they care for.
Absolutely.
And now I just wanted to touch a little bit on survivorship, because I know that you went through your treatment and now life after treatment can feel like a whole new chapter. It can feel really difficult navigating what post-treatment looks like. So I'm wondering what has been helpful for you in survivorship and now post-treatment, and how people have been showing up for you there too.
That's such a great question because I think we focus sometimes so much on the battle. The survivorship kind of gets overlooked. And for me, that honestly might have been the harder part. You think about the treatments and how physically demanding it was. But in my mind, when, I first got the diagnosis and I just asked my doctor, like, can I survive this? And she was like, yes, you're going to survive this. Here's the treatment you need. And at that point, I just went into, I think it's like fight or flight mode. Like you just go. And, I know people don't like the warrior mode as much anymore with cancer, but I liked that image because I just was like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're in fight mode. Let's go. I really didn't process a lot of what was happening and what this all meant. Especially, I didn't know anything about triple negative. I didn't Google it. I didn't look up the statistics. I just It's like, they told me I could live. I'm going to go do this and deal with that. And then I think you get this news that it's gone, it's cancer free. And then you kind of have that mental moment to just go, and then your brain kicks in with everything that just went through and how scary this really was, and like the fear of the future. And that's when the emotions for me really overtook. I think a big thing for me was to acknowledge that. And, people are giving you so many congratulations, but you're kind of mad. Like, I was angry for a while just because, I was mad I had to go through this. I was mad my kids had to go through this. I started getting into the why me kind of angry part. So I think, people are happy. Obviously, you're happy you beat this, but it's the next step that I think people should just be aware of. Like, people aren't going to be just like happy go jolly. Like, there's going to be different emotions. A big thing for me, I definitely had like a therapist that I started going to before I was even diagnosed, and I continued with her. And that was a huge, huge resource for me because I just didn't know how to process a lot of these feelings. I then also just kind of took the opportunity to had a treat yourself year. Like, I took my sister to Italy because, that was my thank you to her for getting me through this. And I wanted to go see Italy. So we went to Tuscany together and, didn't care the cost. We were just like, let's go. And then my husband and I went to Scotland and London and did a trip too. And then, we took the kids to Disney and, tried to do as many fun things as we could think of for a whole year afterwards, just because it was a nice part of just be like, okay, we're back to life. Like, life's going to keep going. We get more time. Like, let's live it up. So I think that was kind of fun. And then now we're a year out. So then it kind of was like, okay, back to business. Got to get back to real life. But I think that just knowing that about people, that the survivorship and just the constant fear of recurrence, especially with triple negative, because it is such a common recurring cancer. I still have to go every 3 months. I always have weird things that show up on labs or on a scan, and I'm constantly going for follow-ups. And you immediately are just terrified. One piece of advice that my therapist gave me that I try and keep with me is, not to react until there's something to react to. So, I try to keep that in mind. Yes, okay, if something looks funny on a lab, instead of spiraling immediately to, oh my gosh, it's back, and now I got to go through this, and it's going to be even worse. And just take a breath and wait. Say, okay, because if we spend time worrying about it today, we're wasting that time. And then, it's going to come or it's not going to come. But, try to appreciate this time. Obviously, it's easier said than done sometimes. It's a mentality that I've really tried to get into lately. Don't react into, because I've reacted and then it turned out to be nothing. It was like, oh, you had too much potassium that day or something silly. So it's just kind of wasted time to be panicking about it.
Yeah, and I hear that often of that, that fear of recurrence and that worry of now what? Now I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. And it's scary, right? Going to those, especially going to scans every 3 months, that fear coming up every time you go, and just waiting for the results, going to that appointment. And that can feel really scary that it's happening so often too. And in terms of survivorship, we often say, a lot of times in movies and TV shows, someone finishes treatment and they throw a party, and that's kind of the end of their cancer experience. But that's not the reality of what it looks like. So oftentimes people think that's what it really looks like in real life, and it's not. And oftentimes after treatment is the hardest part, especially emotionally, because you're just okay, what did I just go through? You're finally you were in that survival mode, going through the treatment, trying to make your way, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, what did I just go through? And your brain can finally pick up on all of those things that you were experiencing through the treatment, and now it's time to process it and be able to really tune into what you're feeling.
Exactly. And I think you got used to people checking on you and kind of showering you, and then everybody kind of disappears. You're okay now, which is, fine. That's expected. But I would say that to people also, maybe still check in on the friend. And if they seem in a bad mood, it's probably them thinking about everything, and don't take it personally.
Yeah. And I guess, is there any other advice you would say in terms of survivorship and in terms of that fear of recurrence and going to appointments, any things that you do that are helpful when you're going to those appointments, or that when you have that worry, because it's always going to be there. It's just about how you're coping with it and how you're managing those fears and those worries.
So I think a big thing when I know those appointments are coming up, I know that's going to be a tough week. So I now kind of mentally prepare for that ahead of time rather than just thinking it's going to be business as usual. I'll go to the appointment, no big deal. I'll now clear out my calendar that day, just, let myself process. Another big thing I learned, it's called EFT tapping. So if anybody looks that up, but it's, where you're tapping and you're hitting the pressure points. I sit and do that while I'm in the waiting room, while I'm waiting for the doctor, while I'm like before the scan starts, before I get, constantly, because I do find it really does help, just telling yourself you're okay, everything's fine right now, just be present. I don't know if it works for everybody, but it gives me like this wash of like release of the anxiety. And it's so funny. I've also noticed I get so scared to go into these appointments and then I feel so much better afterwards. I feel like every time I see my doctor and we have this chat and she's so positive and she's like, all right, get out of here. We'll see you. And then I walk out and I feel great. So, but I think it's just knowing that that's going to be coming and kind of like anticipating it and stop expecting yourself to not be freaked out the day before. You don't have to pretend everything's okay. You don't have to do business as usual. Like, it's okay to be like, look, I'm not doing great today. I've got this appointment tomorrow. Like, everybody leave me alone. I also like hate my chart. Like, I appreciate the advances of it, but I just genuinely stopped checking it because there's so many words on these scan, you get the scan report and it could be something completely innocent, but it's this crazy word and you're trying to like Google everything and you don't really know what you're looking at. So I've had some where I'm like freaking out and then I go in, my doctor's like, no, that doesn't mean anything. You're fine. So I'm like, I don't even read that anymore. Like, I think it's like, it's a blessing and a curse. So I would say people like, don't check your mind chart anymore. Like, wait for your doctor to call you. I know it's hard.
Yeah. No, I hear that often, is that just like that creates more anxiety, especially if you don't have an appointment coming up right away and then you have to wait to call your doctor or you have to wait for that appointment. And then it just creates more anxiety because you're like trying to interpret it. You're trying to be a doctor and you just are interpreting what you can. And I think you mentioned too, just a little bit of advice in terms of navigating survivorship and what that looks like. But I'm wondering too, what's one thing you wish you would have known at the beginning of survivorship, at the beginning of post-treatment? Anything that you would want to share with someone who's just starting, just finishes their treatment and now they have that appointment and now they're considered post-treatment?
Yeah, I think to know it's normal. And I think most of the people I've met, it's normal to not have this big wave of relief, to actually kind of be in shock and kind of angry about it. And it's funny, through, the triple negative breast cancer organization, I found so many women going through the same thing. And I think that's been so beneficial to find people going through the same, and like even at the same stages. Some of us had that same surgery on the same day. So we're like right in the same timeline. And we're talking about it together because nobody else really knows what it feels like to be in our heads other than us, and this fear and this, constant panic and this anger. So I think it's really nice to find other people that you can rely on in that sense, that know how it feels, and or people that are a little ahead of you and can kind of guide you through you were. Like, they do chats every month. I think those are really helpful to get on. I mean, a lot of them are also women going through treatment, but then you find the people that are then post-treatment with you. So, but I think that's I think just giving yourself that grace and knowing that it's normal to not, want to throw a parade and think, oh, well, I'm great now. Everything's fine. Bye. And people kind of will respond that way to you. And I even had people ask, oh, so you're good now, right? Yeah. And it's just like the worst question you ask people, because I'm like, I don't know. Am I? So I think, just be aware. People mean the best, but people aren't always going to say the right thing. So you kind of have to just know it's normal to be pretty irritated with it and go through the process and go through the feelings. And you will eventually start to feel somewhat normal again and hopeful again and get back into a rhythm of life. But it takes time. It takes, like, it's like having a baby. It's going to take like a full year to get through this. So it took me, I mean, still feeling it, but I think I finished treatment about a year ago. And I think about a year, it's what it takes to kind of get through all of it.
And I think that is really helpful advice and normalizes too, like what it's like going through that post-treatment phase and starting that. And I think it's really hard to say like, okay, now what, right? And now jumping into the next phase, and people don't acknowledge it, right? They don't acknowledge that. They say congratulations and then they think you're done and you're good. And it's hard to deal with those comments too, of people thinking that as well. So that could be difficult.
And I think too, for women, especially with breast cancer and having to undergo the mastectomy and all that, I mean, your body's a lot different. You feel a lot different about yourself, especially the reconstruction process for me was a little lengthy. And then you even are still looking at it and you don't feel like the way you used to feel. So it takes a long time to get to know this new version of yourself and kind of grieve the fact that you're not going to ever be who you were before cancer. And that's okay. You just kind of have to say goodbye to that person and then meet this new person and what is it on the other side? And I think your priorities shift, your thoughts about life, your thoughts about, what's important to you is really different. And I think that's a big part of the process too. We called it, we had during cancer, like the butterfly effect. And actually that's why I got where my port is. I got my butterfly. So, and I did like tattoos instead of like nipple reconstruction just because I wanted to kind of claim this new body as something different. But we talked about, you're in your treatment, you're like a little caterpillar in his little cocoon, you're turning into a pile of goo, and then you have to come out the other side as something transformed and something different. And, what can you find that's beautiful about that? And what can you find that's positive and good about that? And it takes a while to learn. And it's I think maybe a forever process, but at least a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear that a lot of just like your perspective changes. And especially as a young adult, right? You're figuring out your way, you're figuring out who you are. And then following a cancer diagnosis, that changes too, your perspective, your values, right? You really reflect on what that meant for you following the cancer diagnosis.
Yes, absolutely.
And you touched on too some of the supports that the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation offers. So I know you mentioned the monthly meetups that they offer for patients as well as for caregivers. And then CancerCare has a partnership with the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. So in partnership, we do have at CancerCare online support groups. So these are like online message board groups where patients can connect with each other. And we do actually have a specific triple negative breast cancer patient group through this online forum, and it is moderated by a social worker. So it is also another form of support. And I would say to reach out to your treatment team, reach out to the people that you know to see what type of supports there are available for you. You mentioned having a therapist. It'd be really helpful to have someone to talk to within your support system, and then also finding other people who you can connect with who are going through something very similar can feel very validating. So I think that you touched on some great ways to finding support as well.
I think that's so important. It's just because if general breast cancer groups are just, it's not going to be the same treatment, not to say any of it's fun, but it's just a different plan. It's different age groups. A lot of times when you walk into the cancer center as a triple negative breast cancer, you're going to be the youngest person there, like you by far. And you go into these support groups and you're the youngest people. And it's just different phases of life. Like we're navigating jobs, we're navigating kids. So it's hard to connect with people that don't quite have that same process. And, we're kind of a rarer form of breast cancer. So it's hard to find those women. So, I do think we're lucky in the post like social media, internet world that we can find each other through these platforms. And I would highly recommend people do that because that was an absolute game changer for me to find, women going through this the same way I was.
And how did you find the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation?
Stumbled upon it on Instagram, just kind of randomly fell across this. I don't even really know how. I mean, I guess the algorithm knows, but it kind of just popped up and I discovered these meetings and went on. I think I was about 3 months into chemo, went into the first meeting and just was blown away. I'm seeing women that are, 10 years out, 15 years out, women that are going through the same place that I am, women that are a few years out, women just diagnosed. So, just to have that open area and to talk about it, and then I was able to kind of dig more into the foundation and get to look at their resources and what they do. And then eventually got to be a part of this ambassador program, which, of course, we use the month of March to really raise awareness for triple negative breast cancer. I know October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but we get our own month. So it's the third month of the year. So it's triple. We do a lot of fundraising specifically for research for this type of breast cancer because, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we're having a different conversation right now as far as, survivorship and what it looked like because, the breakthroughs that they've had because of this research is really important. So it's been fun to be a part of that program. It's a great way to continue to connect with community. And I'm continuing to now meet women behind me that are just now diagnosed. And now I get to be the guide of kind of what it looks like and what I've been through. And that's actually really rewarding. It's helped with the survivorship process to know like I can help people that, are new to this and, offer whatever advice I can give. And it's a great process.
It sounds like it has been really meaningful to you to be able to help others and be able to talk with others who are in a similar place as you, or maybe they're a couple months behind, or even just starting treatment. So it sounds like it's been really meaningful for you to give back to the foundation, give back to others who are maybe in a similar situation.
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned research, and I think with that, I wonder what advocacy looks like for you in terms of triple negative breast cancer. Has the word advocacy changed for you now after being diagnosed? Because I know as an attorney, right, you're an advocate for your clients. So I'm wondering too, like, what that looks like and if that's changed at all.
Definitely, because it wasn't something that was really on my thought process. It wasn't something, I had gone through. I had other medical issues in my family that I'd focused on and had fundraised for. So it was, interesting to now see it from my own personal perspective, something that personally happened to me, not just like a family member. So it definitely was a different, being on this side of things. And I find it more helpful because I can relate so much to what this actually means and what it all felt like, and what these different treatments feel like physically and mentally, and just hopeful that we can find even more treatments that are a little bit easier to live with, that aren't so hard and so difficult. So I think that's been a big process, hoping the research finds even better cures that can make us not have to take 6 months off of being like a mom, whatever that looks like. But that's, and, obviously through this process, I ended up finding out I had a genetic mutation. I have the BRCA1 mutation. So knowing, I have children that could potentially have that mutation as well, and what that means for them in their future. So it's really important to me to, be able to continue seeing the horizon of, better news and better research and, helpful what we can do to, prevent this to begin with.
It sounds like it's made great strides in the last couple of years of the treatments and the treatments available, and hopefully that continues, that the treatments are less aggressive and you're able to continue to do the things that you need to do in life, and puts your life less on hold essentially. And I know you just brought up the BRCA1 mutation, so I'm wondering like what that looked like in terms of testing. How did you find out that you had the BRCA1 mutation?
So it's amazing how simple it is to test for. I couldn't believe it. I feel like it would be amazing if we could all just be tested initially. Because I had so many tumors and because I had such a young age, it became clear that I was a very likely candidate for a genetic mutation. That was something they just did for me. It's completely covered if you're in this type of situation. The facility that does it basically like will pay for it if the insurance companies do not, because they think this is so important to know. So it was automated. It's just a blood test. It's literally a blood draw. It's the same that I do every time I go to the center. So it was, they send it away, they test it out. And, for me, it came back, I think there's 9 different genetic mutations that they've now found that are linked to breast cancer. So obviously everybody knows BRCA1 and BRCA2, but there's a lot others. And so just having the BRCA diagnosis, I think it gives me so much more information for the future, knowing now for my family, like your family members can then be tested for free if they want to. Not everybody chooses to do it, but I think, it's good to know these things. It's important to have this knowledge. For me, by the time I'm 39 now, but at 40, I'm going to have to undergo a hysterectomy because of the link to ovarian cancer. I had a grandfather that had pancreatic cancer, so it's likely that it came from him. And several men in my family have actually had prostate cancer in that same line, which is also linked to BRCA1. So it's pretty clear that that's where it came from. But yeah, it was interesting to me. I kind of felt like it was a relief because I felt a lot of guilt when I was diagnosed. I felt like it was something I had done to myself. At the time, I was a little bit overweight. Yeah, I drink wine. Kind of these other factors, and so it was definitely something that I felt a lot of like shame and guilt over. And ironically, I was kind of relieved to know it was a genetic mutation and not, I'm sure other things have contributing factors, but at least it wasn't, it was kind of just bad luck to have this gene, which is a big part of it. I think I have like an 80% chance that I was going to get breast cancer at some point in my life with that gene. So, those are pretty high odds. It would have been nice to know earlier. I wish, you could get those tests done earlier. Would that have changed what I would have done? I don't know. But it would have been, I think knowledge is definitely power in that area. And it's amazing how easy it is to find out.
Yeah, great to hear that it is a blood test, right? It's really easy to get. And I think a lot of times people might be nervous to find out if they have a gene mutation or not. Because then it, of course, could change the trajectory of your diagnosis, or could change, right, being more susceptible to other cancers too, and not having to go through, like you said, a hysterectomy for preventative reasons. But I think that also helps inform your treatment decisions if these are decisions that you want to make to take control of your health.
Exactly. It gives you a little bit of sense of control for sure, that you can make these choices and look at the statistics and kind of, determine what would be best path for you. So I'm a big fan of it, but yeah, I know not everybody's comfortable getting it done because it's scary. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of like if I don't see it, it's not there, right?
Right. Right. And I'm wondering too, for other young adults, anyone maybe in the 20s or 30s, who are listening to this podcast, I'm wondering if you have any advice for cancer prevention, or, like you said, testing maybe for gene mutations, or to take control of their health. What advice would you give other young adults?
So I think specifically, well, for men and women, that definitely do your regular self-breast exams. There's a whole idea in the triple negative community that on the first of the month, you check yourself. I would absolutely advocate for that, because even if you don't have a family history, you could have a family history that you don't know about. So I think checking yourself and just being aware, knowing your body, knowing what might look unusual, might look different. Going to your regular gynecology appointments, I think, is so huge. Your regular doctor's appointments. I know everybody gets so busy, and life gets in the way, but having cancer is going to really get in the way. So it'd be better to, catch it as early as possible. If you do have a family history, I would highly recommend genetic testing. I mean, if that's something you're able to do, I think it's really important to know it early on. I mean, you can make decisions at a young age that, might help you in the long run. Obviously there's so many genes out there that, have a maybe, but I think some of these stronger ones like the BRCA1 and BRCA2s, it's definitely worth knowing. But I think that's huge. Just follow up and actually go get the medical care, really. And I think just stay active as you can. I think exercise is so important, being active. I wouldn't get too bogged down in a lot of the other stuff. I think there's so much out there anymore, but I think that, that's really the best you can do, is just check yourself, know yourself, and go to your doctor.
Thank you. That's great advice. And I think it's important for young adults, right, to take control of their health and be able to go to appointments. And it can be really scary to go to those follow-up appointments if they do find something, or it can be difficult as a young adult to advocate for yourself as well. I know a lot of, like you said, a lot of people may get dismissed right away of like not getting a mammogram if they do notice something. So I'm wondering too, as a young adult, what advocacy has looked like for you with your medical team. Have you found that difficult at all?
It was interesting. I definitely was lucky that my doctor didn't hesitate. I definitely think if you feel something is wrong, go and get further, second opinions. I was even a little nonchalant about when I first felt the lump, because everybody was so nonchalant. Like, I had a big trial coming up, and I remember being like, I'll schedule the mammogram, I'll get to it. And luckily it happened to be October, so it was breast cancer awareness month. So it was like, I kept seeing the things everywhere. So that kind of pushed me to go get it scheduled. Thank goodness, because had I waited, I mean, it's such a fast progressing cancer that, a month could have made a big difference, potentially in the wrong direction. So I think that's important. I also, with this genetic testing, like, I've kind of pushed back on my doctors a little bit. They wanted me to get the hysterectomy like right away, and I just wasn't ready to do that. I still had I didn't want to be in menopause yet. I wasn't ready for that. I feel like that's a really big life change for a 30-something-year-old to go through. So I've advocated for myself that, no, we're pushing this as close to 40 as I possibly can. Like, we may be scheduling it the day before my 40th birthday. I don't know, but I'm like pushing back. And they're very accommodating with it. I have exams that I get done now, and like blood tests that they can do to continue to watch it. And obviously if something shows up, then that would change the direction of the plan. But for now, everybody is on board with that. I have a mission of, I'm trying to get into a healthier weight now. I think putting on weight during chemo was a big thing. I mean, you go through steroids and your body just kind of changes a lot. So I really want to get into a more comfortable health-wise before we start throwing me into menopause. I also really pushed my doctor to consider, when we do that, if I could potentially do estrogen. supplementation because I didn't have any estrogen positive tumors. And that's now something that she's now talking to all sorts of different doctors and seeing if that is something that's reasonable. So I think it's important to ask those questions and be okay with pushing back. I didn't really do that much during the actual treatment. And now I've met some women that have, and I kind of thought that was awesome to push back a little and ask questions a little more and not just accept it. At the time, it didn't even pop into my head, but I am impressed with that. So I think it's okay to, push back a little bit and have your voice heard and make sure your questions are answered. And like, if you have concerns, then voice them. There was a girl I know that like she didn't do the full chemo plan that everybody else does because she felt like she didn't need it, and I just thought, wow, I didn't even think to ask that. Um, so yeah, I would definitely do that for yourself. I know doctors are really busy and sometimes you feel a little that they're hurried, but I think if you, make them talk to you, you keep asking questions, they're going to have to keep answering them. They're not going to be able to rush out of the room. So I think it's okay to do that and not feel like you're wasting their time or anything.
Absolutely. And I think in doctor's appointments, often like you feel like, oh, you only have like 10 minutes on the clock. And if they don't answer all your questions, then it's okay. And it's not okay. It's important to have all your questions answered and to not feel dismissed. And if there's concerns, to continue to bring those up. Oftentimes I'll share with clients to bring someone with them so that they're not alone there and they're able to have another listening ear. So if you're not able to express your concerns, that person with you can express the concerns for you or be there as just someone, as a source of support. If you can't have someone who's necessarily there with you, maybe there's someone there on the phone, or you can ask the doctor if you can record the conversation so then you can go back to it and listen because you might have questions. Oftentimes it's so easy to be in a doctor's appointment and not remember anything that they said. And so having someone with you or having someone as another listening ear or even recording the conversation could be so helpful. And I'm glad that you brought up like giving pushback. It's okay to give pushback. You know your body, you know who you are. And I think it's important to really be able to ask those questions and share those concerns when they are coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. I did do that a lot, and I would keep a notepad on, my iPhone of questions I had ahead of time, because then you get in there and you're also, kind of in your chemo fog and you forget things. So it was nice to have a notepad. And yes, absolutely. Like I always had my sister with me, my husband, my brother, my sister-in-law to sit there because, I feel like I'm hearing things and they might hear it differently. So absolutely having a second set of ears and someone to take notes was incredibly helpful.
That's great that you're able to have someone there and really be able to be another listening ear and really take notes. I think that's so important because it's so easy to forget things that they mentioned or maybe not process it in the moment too. It can be so hard.
Yes. Sometimes you're getting a lot of information and it's overwhelming. So it's nice to have a second set of ears.
Yes. And especially on that note too, like to even tell your doctors like, hey, can you back up a second? Can you repeat that for me? Because they might be speaking in medical jargon that you may not necessarily understand. So even having them back up and say, hey, can you repeat that for me? And can you say this in another way? Because I'm not fully understanding what you're saying. It can be so important too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. Some of the things, and I could tell you my oncologist, she is amazing. Like her brain is constantly going a million miles an hour. And I'm like, wait, what are we saying?
And you appreciate that she's really thinking about it. But for you and understanding it, it might not come across the way that you need it to come across in that moment.
Absolutely.
And in terms of wrapping up, and I just wanted to see if you had any advice or anything that you would share with someone who's just recently diagnosed with TNBC. Is there anything that you would want to share with them in conclusion to this episode?
There's a lot I could share with them, but I think, I think trust what the doctors are saying. I think don't Google things. That's always number one, especially with triple negative, because the research is so much farther along than even the internet understands. Don't look at statistics. Just trust what you're going through. Trust the process. It's going to be really hard. I would say absolutely accept all the help you can get. I think even at the beginning, I was hesitant to, people offered to start a GoFundMe or a meal train, and I felt uncomfortable with that. And then now look in hindsight, it was like, no, that would have been actually a really helpful thing to have. I think this is, a financial burden. This is a physical burden, a mental burden. anything anybody's willing to do to help, just say yes to. And it's okay to let go of control a little bit and trust other people in your village to come help you with your kids, help you with your life, help you with your house. I think absolutely finding these support groups, see if you can find one right away, because it'll make you feel just so much better immediately. Finding a mental health professional right away. And then people are going to give you all sorts of unsolicited advice. Oh, did you hear about these mushroom pills? And have you heard about, juicing and da-da-da? There's a lot of noise. I think just do what makes you feel good in the process. I didn't like juicing sounded disgusting to me. I tried to drink it. Everything tasted like salt. So, I just tried to find like protein pasta that I could eat that was very bland and plain. So you got to find what works for you. I think try to focus on like hydration was so important, and nobody told me that. I'm like, why was I not hydrating before chemo? Because it made it so much better when I did discover it. And just focus on, getting the nourishment you can get. I would say try and get outside a lot, try and stay active. I did a lot of walking because you're not going to feel like exercising per se, but just getting outside, getting in those, like walking, you have to be careful with the sun, but just being outdoors, kind of connecting with nature. And I think meditation really did help, like just thinking about the medicine in your body and what it's doing. Even if you're not someone that's into that normally, I think that process is really therapeutic through this. So, but you know what? It's going to be a tough year, and there's a horizon on the other side, and then survivorship starts.
Mm-hmm.
Whole other can of worms.
I think you touched on really important topics, and being able to navigate the healthcare system, talking with loved ones, talking with family members, talking to your kids about the cancer diagnosis, and really being able to reach out for support when you need it. There's so many resources available, like support groups, mental health professionals. There's organizations like the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation and CancerCare who are here to help you connect to resources. And like you said, it's also a financial burden, which we didn't really touch on today, but there are financial implications and barriers oftentimes with treatment. Like you mentioned, you are traveling really far. So there are organizations that can help with paying for gas or help with that cost. So I think it's really important to know that there's so many resources out there available for patients, and it might take some time to find that, but it's going to be important to really connect to those organizations that you feel will help you and support you.
Absolutely. No, I think that is such a great point. I really appreciate you letting me on here today to talk about this. Of course, for the month of March, focusing on triple negative and bringing the awareness to it, and what we can do in the future is so important. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think I have anything else on my end.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for being here today. We really do appreciate all you shared, and I hope that for those listening, they're able to connect to some part of your story or some part of your experience and able to really take something out of it and find the support that they may need right now. And knowing that you're not alone. If you're listening to this podcast, there's so many supports, there's so many ways to get connected with support, and really to know that you're not alone. So thank you so much, Allison, for being here with us, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Cassie. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for doing this.
Thanks for tuning in to Cancer Out Loud, the CancerCare podcast. CancerCare is the leading national nonprofit organization providing free professional support services, including resource navigation, cancer-focused counseling, support groups, educational resources, and financial assistance to anyone affected by cancer. You can visit us online at cancercare.org or call our toll-free Hope line at 800-813-HOPE. That's 800-813-4673 to speak with a master's prepared oncology social worker.